Welcome to another episode of the Pennock Knockdown, a podcast where we unpack key strategies and tactics for emerging beauty brands. Today, I am joined by Anthony Standifer. He's the co-founder and chief marketing officer at mSEED Group. They're a contract manufacturer that work specifically in the beauty space and have capabilities to run both small and very large batch quantities of products. We're talking about as little as 500 units all the way up to 50,000 and maybe even more. So Anthony, what a breadth of opportunity you bring to the beauty industry. We're so excited to have you here today.
Awesome. Hey, it's a pleasure to chat with you, Nikki. I've heard some of your prior episodes, so I'm excited for today's conversation.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to kick it back to you, Anthony, and tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to co-found mSEED Group.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, great question. I'm a bit of a reluctant entrepreneur. I've been in the beauty industry for my entire adult life, so 25 years of working in the beauty space. The first part of that, the first 15, I worked on as a brand manager and as a marketer inside of big multinational companies. And so most of that time, was about 8 years or so, was in different divisions of Revlon. I'm here in the United States and then a little bit abroad as well overseas. For the last 10 years, however, I've been the co-founder and chief marketing officer at this manufacturing facility, mSEED Group. And it's been an interesting career pivot for me because, again, I'm a brand manager and a marketer by heart. But I met a woman who had an amazing idea for supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs in the beauty space. And when the opportunity presented itself, I was like, okay, let's give it a try. And 10 years later, here we are as a contract manufacturing facility in the Chicagoland area.
Wow. So how was that transition for you? So coming from very large corporations, a different part of the corporation now into contract manufacturing, what was that first couple of months journey looking like for you? Was it a huge learning curve?
A little crazy. So it's interesting, but in reflection, I realized that all of the pieces of my corporate America experience actually prepared me as an owner. So even as a brand person, every company, the 3 or 4 companies that I worked for in my career, all of them were attached to manufacturing. So we owned brands, but I worked for companies that had manufacturing in-house. And so I was always directly in connection as the brand person with launching new products, making sure that inventory and promotions from everybody from Walmart to Target to Sephora to internationally to Boots and the people around in other countries. And so I was quite familiar with the process from a customer perspective. I mean, we were in-house customers, but owning and actually being the manufacturer gave it a definite new spin. And it's been quite interesting. Fortunately, I have an amazing business partner who knows the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of our facility and the processes. But over time, I've certainly acclimated to the process, and I understand at least what the outcomes should look like. And so for me, in supporting small businesses, I'm providing counsel and guidance to folks to say like, hey, I've been in a version of your shoes and have seen what it's like to have an idea and take that idea from ideation to like, wow, there's a physical jar in my hand with a label and a brand and good stuff inside that is actually designed to meet a consumer need. And so that's been the real value that we've attempted to offer inside of mSEED Group over the last decade. And I've been pretty fortunate to have supported about 250 or so brands and founders in the marketplace.
That's incredible. That's a huge quantity of brands to help. So tell us a little bit about how brands are finding you and at what point of their brand journey, life stage of the brand is like, the best time to kind of come and get some juice from you guys.
Yeah. So folks typically find us, oddly enough, we don't do a lot of formal advertising
Mhm.
of our facility and of the services that we offer. Folks find us generally through one of 2 paths. They get referred to us from someone that we know inside of the industry or from, at this point, other customers who've done business with us. And then secondarily, people find me through social media. It's one of the reasons, as a marketer that I lean so heavily as a manufacturer into things like this, social media, podcast, because my goal is to give and to provide information and access to people. And as I leverage social media and my business partner does that as experts in the field, that people see this kind of content and go, let's take a look and take a glance And in many instances, we're a great partner for many people in terms of particularly when they're starting out. So people can come when they have an idea and they're saying, I have no idea how to formulate or manufacture a product, but I know generally what I want. And so we're happy then to work with our chemist and to bring people in and to bring those ideas into an actual formulation. And then the second batch of people are people who are DIYers. And so I love my folks who are batching product at 12 midnight and 1 a.m. in the morning because during the day they're actually either working a full-time job or supporting their brand. And so those are the people, once that demand gets to be so big that they have to come out of batching at midnight and onboard a facility and a manufacturer like ours. And so generally those are the two. And in most recent years, as we've gotten larger as a company, we have found some existing brands that are in the marketplace that are just looking for a different type of partner, because we do try to be really collaborative in the way that we service our customers, and really understanding that the trajectory is not just putting formulas in a bottle or a jar and shipping it out, but it truly is a partnership. And partnership for us looks really, really specific because we do want to make sure that we're collaborating with our customers in specific ways and not just shipping products to folks and saying, well, come see me when you need another 10,000 units, but actually getting into the weeds and some of the details with many of our customers.
I love it. Okay, so it sounds like the ways in which brands come to you or the life stage they're in is um, very new, have an idea. They want to work with your chemist to formulate the product and then get those smaller, probably batch quantities out into the world. The second is DIY. They've got some formulation down. Maybe they need to tweak it once they come to you. But again, they're the smaller size and they're just launching their business at a non-DIY scale.
Correct.
And then the third are brands of any size that just want a different partner for existing products and formulations to be manufactured through mSEED Group.
1,000% spot on there.
Wonderful. Okay. And I love that word of mouth and just referral is going so well for you guys. That's such a important thing to have, is that great reputation in an industry as seemingly small as beauty, right? There's a lot of people know the people. So it's great to have that reputation and that referral coming through. I want to step back for a minute and ask about your brand name. What is mSEED Group about in terms of the brand positioning?
We get asked that question very, very often. I love it. So MC Group, just as a ethos, we're people who took a leap of faith and quit good jobs and decided to go out and start on our own vision. And so as we were thinking about what to call this company, my business partner we both had ideas, and she came back with an idea, and I was like, oh my God, I think that's it. And so mSEED is the M in mSEED stands for mustard. And so mustard seed is, if you're of the Christian faith, there's a quote in the Bible that talks about faith the size of a mustard seed can then move mountains. And a mustard seed in and of itself is a really, really tiny thing, but that thing then grows into a bigger thing. And so part of our journey and the journey of the people that we're supporting is based on our faith, whether they're Christian or non-Christian. And people are out here trying to take a vision and make it happen. And it takes a ton of work and a lot of chutzpah to make that happen. And so we definitely aligned around that as we were starting our own company, and really desire to be a support mechanism behind those brands as they're taking their own leap of faith and using their own mustard seed to make their thing happen.
Love it. That is so impactful. Thank you. I'm glad I asked the question too. You never know where those are going to go.
You never know what's going to happen. Yeah.
So Anthony, I think, just in the definition of the brand name and brand position and earlier comments, it sounds like you're going above and beyond what a traditional contract manufacturing firm will do. I'm not as familiar with your line of work as you and other people in the industry are. When you say that you do that differently than others out there, like, break it down for me, help me understand what that means.
Yeah. So traditionally, I mean, our concept of owning a manufacturing facility is not unique or revolutionary. But what we do find, and what we found 10 years ago and still to be very true today, is that service providers in this industry, number one, are filtering people at levels that then put a ton of people outside the gate and don't allow access to manufacturing. And it happens in a couple of different ways, but primarily there's just large minimum order quantities, or MOQs, as we say in the industry, when you go to talk to a manufacturer. So if Nikki decides like, hey, I'm going to do an amazing serum and I want to, I've got an idea and I, know some key ingredients, a traditional manufacturer will say, well, great, we'll start you with 10,000 units of this or 25,000 units of this, something that you have, and we're happy to produce it. For most entrepreneurs, that is completely inaccessible because the industry is set up in today's, since 2000 and 2010 specifically, so many people are starting their ideas and their entrepreneurial journey self-funded. So that means that these are people that are working full-time jobs, have families, have bills, and don't have $60,000 to just start on manufacturing. And so for us, it was super important that we lower the barrier of entry. And by lowering the barrier of entry, we said, hey, what would it look like to say, I'll make 500 units of something for you instead of 15,000. Now, granted, if you buy 500 units of something for me, the price per unit is going to be higher than if you were buying 10,000 units. But man, if your cost of goods in the early days turns out to be $11 because you're buying at such a small volume, that is far more accessible than being able to say, well, yeah, I can take that $11 and then get it down to $4 because I'm buying at such a great volume. But if you've got to buy 10,000 of that, then it becomes a barrier of entry. And so our first goal was to ensure that we lowered the order quantity that was necessary. And then second, we found in the marketplace that people were getting access to smaller batches, but they typically do it under what's called private label manufacturing. And it's super common. Skincare, color cosmetics are very, very known for it, where essentially you're buying stock formulas. And so you've got an idea and you're able to buy small quantities, but you're not able to customize those formulas in a way that makes it unique and novel to your brand vision. And so for us, we said, hey, that shouldn't be. Like, what would it look like to offer custom formulation for people that are buying small volumes and just charge it as a service? I mean, my business partner is a cosmetic chemist. And so the idea of formulating was not something that was unique or new or foreign. It was like, hey, give me a brief, tell me what you want, and we'll then put together the formulas that you're looking for. And so for us, the combination of custom formulations, because 100% of our customers have a custom formula that they're working with inside of our environment, and then combining that with low volume manufacturing has been our unique point of difference as we've gone to market and scale, and still holds to be true even in today's environment 10 years later.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I love the approach that isn't private label because that just kind of feels icky to be buying something that already exists and there's maybe 85 brands selling that exact same thing and just slap a new label on it. But that's just an N of one here. I would be curious going into formulations and stuff, and maybe this is better for your co-founder than for you, but in early 2025, are there top ingredients that you're seeing like people want to use over and over? I know we had like the niacinamide hit a few years ago. I know, retinol, retin-A is a huge ingredient these days too. Like, are you finding anything that's trending that general pop might not know about?
Yeah, no, I think the trends right now, honestly, in terms of innovations, we still see this. I call it the maturation of clean beauty. Clean beauty as a concept is, I'd say, a preteen at this point in its life cycle. It hasn't quite figured out what it's going to be as an adult. And there's varied definitions around what clean beauty looks like. Because we live in, at least here in the United States, clean beauty is an unregulated term. And so the FDA and government agencies don't regulate what it means to be clean. And so each individual retailer actually determines their definition of what clean looks like. So if you're shopping at Sephora, that's a different benchmark than Target, which is different than Credo Beauty, which is different than Walgreens or any other retailer. And so because there's such varied definitions and standards out there, we're still finding ourselves navigating as chemists and formulators, navigating in conjunction with our brand founders, like, well, what is the standard that you're looking to adhere to? And there's a real interesting juxtaposition when you talk about clean beauty in connection with performance, because there are some known sacrifices that you give up. It's something as simple as fragrance. So, people say, okay, well, great, I want to be clean, but I want to have this specific smell or this specific fragrance profile. Well, there's some really clear limitations in terms of what we can do with fragrance when we start talking clean beauty. And so managing with essential oils and other fragrances that provide that kind of scent is doable, but it's not as durable as some of the non-clean beauty fragrances that have existed in the marketplace. And so just educating and giving people awareness of that is been part of our job and part of the thing that we do when we consult with brands. I don't see, I mean, there's always these little niche technologies and niche ingredients that come through. We were just working on a project, and we're trying to develop we are developing a heat serum. But the goal is to develop a clean heat serum that will then adhere and then be durable against 400-degree heat as you're flat ironing and blow drying your hair. And so some of our raw material suppliers have done some really interesting things with ingredients that we've been testing out and just seeing just how durable it is. But it is, again, in that instance, a sacrifice because there's some really known silicones that will bind themselves to the hair shaft and give you the kind of protection that you need so that when you're blow drying every day or flat ironing every day, that your hair then has a level of protection that is not easily replicated with clean beauty ingredients. And so it's an interesting trade-off that we work actively with our customers on as we start to talk about this idea of innovation, technology, and adhering to this desired standard, but recognizing that, hey, from a functional, practical perspective, there may be some trade-offs. You may not be able to say 450 degrees. I may be able to say 350. And so if you're okay with that, then we can certainly go down that path. But it's an interesting evolution that we find ourselves in, particularly when we start talking about the topic of clean beauty.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think in the innovation and formulation stage, no matter what, like you are consulting, advising these brands, but at the end of the day, they do what they want. And so I imagine, like us, sometimes we have clients who come to us with, not so great ideas. And we're like, well, we can do that, but here's our advice to you. And I assume you deal with a lot of that same stuff where
That's 1,000%. And the aspiration versus the reality is the place where we come in and say, great, we can do anything that you say. But, if we go so far, if your product is then going to cost 6 times more than what the market is currently charging, but you've got the best, most innovative formula, just be prepared to charge 6 times more, then it becomes an ultimate reality check of, maybe I need to take a different path as a brand founder in terms of what goes to market.
aside from the formulation and like looking at a brand as a whole, how are you coaching brands around this is outside of your lane, this is probably more veering into mine, but like the aesthetics of the brand. I'll give you an example. I was given a sample the other day from a new brand that we're considering working with, and for whatever reason, my expectations were not that high. Like I knew it was a higher price point. There was just something about it that felt like a little cheapened, and like I wasn't I wasn't expecting to be moved by the product. And I used the product last night. And I'm like, this is the best effing thing I've ever used like this. And so I was just like thoroughly surprised because the aesthetic and positioning just felt cheapened. And I guess my question to you is like, how much do those other things, in your opinion, matter that are outside of the formulation?
Oh my gosh. So I'm a brander and a marketer at heart, and I still provide consultation to founders as they're coming through and going through the process. I have controversial opinions about that, but why not? Let's do it here. And so I believe, and this is again 25 years of experience, and so I have this sort of older legacy perspective about things. When you talk packaging, particularly when people come to me and they start talking sustainability on packaging, and the first thing that I ask is, where do you desire to be sold at retail? If you have a retail desire. So in the beginning, everybody's selling on e-commerce, and so that's where you start. But if you're saying like, I really want to be on Ulta shelves, or I really want to go to Nordstrom's, or I really want to be in some of these masstige or higher end stores, then the thing that I push back on is then you got to go into those stores and look at what's sitting on the shelf now and what's coming out of places like Estee Lauder and some of the big multinationals that are selling in those channels. And while they have embraced some of the sustainability and some of the minimalism that the market has said they desire, it isn't that way amongst the majority of the brands that are sold there. And so you taking a path that then is different and maybe aligns with the ethos, then means that visually, when you're not there to give your full marketing spiel and somebody's just walking in a store and going down an aisle, that visually people need to go like, yes, this feels like something that I should try. And so I'm a fan of like there's an in between to sustainability and minimalism, but that then still gives you the ability to stand out and feel like you belong in the place that you're in. Simple things that we talk about. Again, not so popular opinion, but I'm a fan of outer cartons. And so we can do simplistic designs and use outer cartons to then elevate or to provide a different type of packaging. And we can even take those packages and make them out of recycled materials and things that are more eco-friendly. But there is a desire, I believe, when you're sitting at shelf that you've got to be prepared to compete against the big boys and girls that are sitting on the shelf next to you. And in order to do that, like the visual footprint has to matter and has to be like, wow, I belong here and I deserve the price point that I'm asking for. So those are the kinds of things that I offer to folks when they start talking about like where their desire to be and then balancing sustainability and packaging and what that looks like. Very few brands are able to be ASOP. And so ASOP is my great example. It's the most simple amber bottles and jars, a simple label, but they have worked for 40 years at this point to establish their position in the marketplace. And so if you've got 40 years to sort of take your innovative design and make it consistent over time, then great. But if you're saying like, hey, I really want this thing to move and I really want this thing to grow in a 5 to 7 year time frame, then what does the market look like today? And how can you then align with that in certain ways that then gives you the ability to say, like, this is not the outlier and that this is the thing that's going to also help you stand out, whether it be ingredients, packaging, colors, whatever that thing looks like.
Well, and I can tell you firsthand, and I'm sure you've got this experience too for the audiences. We've been helping brands that are 6 months into their existence and they're already rebranding. And it's clearly because they weren't asked the questions you, Anthony, would ask them, or they weren't thinking that way.
Right.
And, the double cost of branding twice, I can only imagine.
Honestly, it's a thing that every brand does. So like there's, any brand is going to have a rebrand, but if you've like literally done a 180 turn in terms of visualization, then you likely haven't spoken to and taken the time to do the research in terms of like, who am I selling to from a niche perspective? What do I desire in terms of what that niche customer is already using today? And then how can I be in alignment, but disruptive at the same time to say like, stop using this and now start using me. Because essentially, as brand founders, that's what we're working to convince people is stop doing what you've been doing. Use me instead, and I can deliver you better results than what you're currently and address a problem that still lingers because of the existing product or regimen that you're using.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. One of the things we've observed in our industry space is just the return of collectives and smaller groups doing outsourced marketing, specialized in certain verticals, etc. Just one of many of the changes we're observing in the lanes of work we are in as a paid media agency. Are you finding similar shifts in terms of what your customer wants, the brand wants, when it comes to partnering with a
Oh,
team?
100%. I mean, the media landscape and branding landscape is evolving. Everyone is in this flux of like, well, can I just do everything on Fiverr with freelancers across the world at a low cost and in conjunction with AI and ChatGPT or Claude and just run a marketing department inside of my startup brand. And while I say that's one way to do it, if you're not skilled at the management side of having that kind of virtual team across the world and knowing what the outcomes should look like, then you're likely going to waste money and spend money spinning. And so the advice that I give to folks is, and it's a tough decision because particularly as a brand founder, you don't have an unlimited budget. I manage brands where on the small side, I was given like $400,000 and that was like $400,000. How do you expect me to grow a brand with that little bit of money? To then having multi-million-dollar launches, which were the average for the brands that I did. So then saying to a brand founder who has very, very limited resources, like make this thing work. And it's usually their money and not some outside corporate entity that is given to them. So it's a tough thing. And but the thing that I highly encourage folks is to take it in steps, prioritize, what is the most important thing once. And I'm super regimented about the most important thing. And the most important thing being is, how do you convert people that don't know you into buying customers? And typically that can happen through digital advertising, and it's the most effective amongst the majority of people. Not all, but the majority of brands is like, how can you take advertising that's going to be disruptive and get in people's face that then gets their attention? Because that then puts them at the top of a funnel to say like, okay, great, this is kind of interesting. I never knew about this brand. And so how do you find practitioners that do digital marketing with indie brands, hopefully indie beauty brands, really, really well? Because then they will speak the nuance and the language of what it's like to speak to your core demographic in a way that is unique and innovative. And so, just aligning on the things that are important and the things that are not important. For instance, I'm not an advocate of starting with PR unless if you're an indie brand, unless you're like a celebrity of some sort, that you're leveraging your platform that already has tens and hundreds of thousands or millions of people, then PR is not the place to start, my opinion, in terms of the most effective way to engage people to buy your product. But good, solid digital advertising, a really succinct e-commerce site, and a killer copywriter that understands email marketing is the suite that then I've seen most small brands use and effectively find people, engage them, convert them, and then learn the lessons that they need to learn in the early days about like, well, what does their brand really offer in terms of value, and recognizing, to your earlier point, and people might say, well, this was a nice product, but the packaging sucks. And I would have never bought it if it hadn't have been for these other things. Well, then those are the things that you want to learn in the early days, is that like, hey, there's a disconnect between this packaging that you thought was so amazing versus what the actual buying customer is receiving, and saying like, okay, great. Now it's time to go back and do tweaks and adjustments and the kind of things that are necessary. So long answer, but that's part of what I've seen in terms of things that have worked really well for small brands.
Well, and I think, like, to the point you're hitting on too, just going back and having conversations, like surveying your early customers. Like, I didn't get a survey from this brand that looked cheaper than it was, but I should probably give that feedback, right? So I think just being open to hearing this stuff from your early adopters and your early.
Like 1,000%. And here's a hack to your point. Like, I get surveys all the time for everything from events to products. And sometimes I'm like, I just don't have time for this. However, when I get an email or a text message, let alone a phone call from someone, like, I encourage every brand founder, for the first 500 people, you have to text them, email them, and call them in order to have a direct conversation with them about their buying experience with you. Because hearing directly from consumers is the most valuable piece of information that no one else can give you. And it's the thing that I'm radical in terms of pushing my founders to do in the early days, because I've seen it work. Where just in talking to the first 100 people, you realize, oh, I thought this, but this has been the real deal here. And I only know that because I got on the phone and sent a text message to somebody to say, hey, I'm the founder of XYZ brand. Would you mind talking to me for 15 minutes? And a substantial number of people are absolutely willing to have a 15-minute conversation with you about something that they purchased from you, and to give you feedback that will be honest. And people will be polite, generally speaking, but they'll still give you candid feedback to say like, yeah, it was okay. And, I was okay with it. Or like, I bought it, I used it once, and it just didn't do what I thought it was going to do. And that, so important for founders to get in the early days.
Totally. I love that. All right, Anthony, I want to go back in time. So let's pretend it's 25 years ago and you're just starting out. What advice would you give your younger self?
Wow. So younger Anthony was just out there just doing all the things. And that's actually one of the things I like about myself, is that I just go and do. But I was very sort of like focused on accomplishment. Like, I've got this job. Okay, great. I need to do these things. I got this. I want to do this. I want to be here in the next 3 years. I want to be here, 5 years after that. And so I tended to be really driven in a way that was good in some ways, but I would absolutely tell the younger version of Anthony, like, settle into it, and you don't need to know everything right now. The answer to the question is not necessary today. Like, in the experience of life, you're going to get so much more value in just kind of learning it as it happens. And don't be afraid of the things that you don't know. Because even today, as I think about like being a founder and a business owner, that was never on my my radar. When I think about like, well, okay, I'm going to own a business, but a manufacturing facility, like I have a history degree and I'm a marketer. How do you then go from that to owning a manufacturing facility? But all of those things have been part of the journey, and if I had stressed about them, I to been a little more relaxed and at ease with the fact that yes, you can paddle to a certain degree, but just let the waves of life also have an influence on what you're doing and where you end up.
I love that. Anthony, this has been great. I appreciate your time and coming on the show today. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Cool. Yeah, I am on the social medias. And so Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at the Anthony Standifer. So the Anthony Standifer. And then LinkedIn at Anthony Standifer. So those are the places that I show up most frequently. I'm happy to have people DM me in those platforms. I respond to them. It's like my nighttime routine. It's like, okay, let me go into the inbox and see what's happening there. And I'm happy to answer questions. Like if it's short and easy. If I don't know the answer, I'm a great referrer to other people. But yeah, those are the places that people can connect with me.
Great. We'll throw links in the show notes so people know how to easily find you. I appreciate
Oh,
your
and then they can also see me on my website, like mcgroup.com. So I got a whole company too, so you can find me out there as well.
wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Anthony. This has been super insightful. So I appreciate everything you had to share.
Awesome. Thank you for a delightful conversation, Nikki. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.